I pulled out my worn composition notebook, the one I'd kept hidden under my mattress, and opened it to a fresh page. Numbers had always been my refuge. Unlike people, they were predictable, logical, beautiful. They didn't judge me or call me names or make me feel broken. As I began to write, my breathing slowly returned to normal. Patterns emerged on the page. Sequences and equations and geometric shapes that made perfect sense in a way that my family never would. In this private world of mathematics, my difference wasn't a flaw to be fixed. It was simply how I saw the universe, in angles and algorithms and elegant solutions. For the first time all day, I smiled. The cafeteria buzzed with teenage conversation and the clatter of plastic trays, but I sat alone at the corner table I'd claimed as my sanctuary. While other students gossiped about weekend plans and upcoming football games, I hunched over my notebook, completely absorbed in a problem that had been nagging at me for days. It wasn't homework. Mrs. Peterson's algebra assignments were too simple, solved in minutes while she was still explaining the concept to the class. This was different. A puzzle I'd found in an old math journal at the library, something about prime number distributions that made my brain light up with possibilities. God, look at Karen, I heard Ashley Martinez whisper to her friends at the next table. She's like obsessed with numbers. It's so weird. My mom says people like that end up as crazy cat ladies, living alone, talking to themselves. I kept writing, my pencil moving across the page in quick, precise strokes. I'd learned long ago that reacting to their comments only made things worse. Besides, I was too deep in the problem to care about their ignorance. The number sequence I was analyzing had a pattern buried within it, something elegant and hidden that most people would never see. But I could see it. I could feel it, the way other people might feel music or poetry. There was beauty in the mathematical relationships, a kind of truth that existed beyond the messiness of human emotions and social hierarchies. Miss Salonga? I looked up, startled to find Mr. Davidson, my calculus teacher, standing beside my table. He was young for a teacher, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm sorry to interrupt your lunch, but I couldn't help noticing your work." He gestured to my notebook. "May I?" Hesitantly, I turned the notebook toward him. Most adults who looked at my mathematical doodlings either dismissed them as meaningless scribbles or, worse, accused me of showing off. But Mr. Davidson's expression grew increasingly intrigued as he studied the page. "This is extraordinary," he murmured, tracing one of my equations with his finger. "You're working on the Goldbach conjecture?" I nodded, surprised he recognized it. "I found a reference to it in the library. I know it's probably impossible, but I was thinking maybe if you approached it from a different angle." "Different how?" I felt heat rise in my cheeks. This was always the hard part, trying to explain how my mind worked to people who thought in straight lines while I thought in spirals and webs of connection. Well, everyone focuses on trying to prove it directly, but what if you inverted the problem? Instead of proving that every even integer can be expressed as the sum of two primes, what if you proved that the exceptions form a pattern that ultimately negates itself? Mr. Davidson's eyebrows shot up. "That's actually quite sophisticated. Where did you learn about proof by contradiction at this level?" "I taught myself. I like reading math books." For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he pulled out his phone and took a picture of my notebook page. "Karen, would you mind if I showed this to a colleague of mine, Dr. Chen at the university?" My heart started racing. A university professor looking at my work? She's not going to think it's stupid. "Stupid?" Mr. Davidson laughed. "Karen, this is graduate level thinking. You're 17 and you're approaching problems that PhD candidates struggle with. This isn't stupid. This is remarkable." The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch. Students around us began gathering their things, the cafeteria filling with the scraping of chairs and shuffling of feet. But I remained frozen in place, Mr. Davidson's words echoing in my mind. Remarkable. Not weird, not obsessive, not an excuse or a flaw to be hidden away.
I have to get to class, I said, closing my notebook and clutching it against my chest like a shield. Of course. But Karen, Mr. Davidson's voice stopped me. Keep working on this. You have something special.
I walked to my next class in a daze. For years, my parents had dismissed my love of mathematics as another one of my strange fixations, like my childhood obsession with organizing objects by color and size, or my need to follow the same route to school every day. They saw it as part of the same package that made me difficult: my sensitivity to noise and crowds, my struggle with social cues, my tendency to hyper-focus on topics that interested me while completely ignoring things that didn't. But what if they were wrong? What if the same brain that made me feel like an alien in my own family was actually capable of seeing things that others missed? In physics class, I found myself barely listening to Mr. Rodriguez's lecture on wave mechanics. Instead, I was thinking about prime numbers, about patterns and proofs, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, my difference wasn't a disability to overcome. Maybe it was a gift I'd never learned to unwrap. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. After school, I walked home slowly, taking the long route that led past the library. Inside, I found the mathematics section and pulled down every book I could carry. Number theory, abstract algebra, topology, words that sounded like magic spells, promising secrets I was desperate to learn. That evening at dinner, while my parents discussed Daniel's latest football achievement and my mother complained about her difficult customers at the bank, I sat quietly, my mind still spinning with mathematical possibilities. Karen's being even weirder than usual today, Daniel observed, stabbing his meatloaf with his fork. She's got that spaced-out look. I was just thinking. About what? My mother asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really want to know. Prime numbers. My father sighed. There she goes again. Karen, normal kids your age think about dating, friends, what college they want to attend. You think about numbers. Maybe that's okay, I said quietly. The table went silent. It was the first time I'd ever suggested that my interests might be valid rather than apologizing for them. It's not okay, my father said firmly. It's another excuse to avoid real life. You need to focus on practical things, not live in some fantasy world of equations. But as I sat there, nodding obediently, while inside my mind raced with mathematical possibilities, I made a silent promise to myself. Maybe my family couldn't see the beauty I found in numbers. Maybe they would always view my passion as a character flaw rather than a strength. But for the first time in my life, I was beginning to suspect they might be wrong. Saturday mornings in the Carter household followed a predictable routine. Daniel left early for football practice, basking in my parents' proud wishes of good luck and play hard. My mother cleaned the house with methodical precision while listening to talk radio. My father read the newspaper and complained about everything wrong with the world. And I lied. I'm going to the library, I announced, slinging my backpack over my shoulder. Again? My mother looked up from dusting the coffee table. Karen, you spend too much time alone with those books. You should be out making friends, being social. If only she knew. If only I could tell her that I wasn't going to the library at all, but to the math enrichment program that Dr. Miriam Chan had invited me to join after reviewing my work. That for the first time in my life, I'd found a place where other people thought the way I did, where my obsession with numbers wasn't seen as a character flaw, but as potential to be nurtured. I need to research something for a school project, I said instead. Another lie, but a necessary one. My parents had made their feelings about my mathematical interests crystal clear. In their minds, anything beyond basic arithmetic was impractical dreaming, a waste of time that could be better spent on real-world skills. Just be back by dinner, my father called from behind his newspaper. And stop at the grocery store on your way home. We need milk. I nodded and escaped before they could ask more questions.
The bus ride to the university took 45 minutes, but I didn't mind. I used the time to review the problems Dr. Chan had given me the week before. Complex proofs that would have challenged graduate students, but which made my brain sing with excitement. While other teenagers were sleeping in or hanging out at the mall, I was preparing to spend my Saturday morning diving deep into the kind of mathematics that most people would never encounter. The math building was quiet on weekends, but Dr. Chan had arranged for a small group of gifted students to meet in one of the seminar rooms. When I walked in, I found 5 other
Teenagers already there, 3 boys and 2 girls, all of whom looked as out of place in typical social settings as I felt. Karen! Dr. Chen's warm voice greeted me from the front of the room. She was a petite woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that seemed to see straight into your soul. Perfect timing. We were just starting to discuss the Riemann hypothesis. I took my usual seat near the back and pulled out my notebook. Around me, the other students were already engaged in animated conversation about zeta functions and complex analysis. For once, I wasn't the weird one. Here, everyone spoke the language of mathematics fluently. Before we dive in, Dr. Chen said, I want to share something exciting. Karen's work on prime number distributions has caught the attention of some colleagues at MIT. They're interested in seeing more of her research. Heat flooded my cheeks as the other students turned to look at me with expressions of genuine admiration. MIT? The Massachusetts Institute of Technology was interested in my work? That's incredible, Karen, said Marcus, a junior from a private school across town. How long have you been working on number theory? Just this year, really, I admitted. Before that, I didn't even know it existed. Self-taught? Asked Sarah, one of the 2 girls in our group. When I nodded, she whistled. That's amazing. Most of us have been in accelerated programs since elementary school. The conversation flowed around me as we worked through increasingly complex problems. For 3 hours, I felt completely at home. My brain operated at full capacity without anyone telling me to slow down or focus on more important things. When I got stuck on a particularly challenging proof, the others helped me work through it. When I solved something quickly, they celebrated my success rather than making me feel guilty for being different. But all good things had to end. The bus ride home felt like a transition between 2 different worlds. By the time I walked through our front door, I was back to being the weird daughter who spent too much time thinking about useless things. How was the library? My mother asked from the kitchen. Fine, I said, another lie adding to the growing pile. Very productive. Dinner that night was a celebration of Daniel's latest football victory. The trophy he'd won sat in the center of the table like a golden shrine, and my parents spent the entire meal recounting his athletic achievements. Coach says Daniel could get a full ride to state if he keeps improving, my father beamed. Now that's what I call practical success, something that actually matters in the real world. Unlike wasting time on math puzzles, my mother added, though she said it with a smile, as if my interests were harmless but silly quirk. I pushed my mashed potatoes around my plate, thinking about Dr. Chem's words. MIT was interested in my work. A world-renowned institution wanted to see more of my research. But I couldn't share this news with my family because they wouldn't understand. They'd find a way to diminish it or explain why it didn't matter. Karen's been spending a lot of time at the library lately, my mother continued. I keep telling her she needs to be more social, make some friends her own age. Maybe she could help manage equipment for the football team. Get involved in something normal for once. I looked up from my plate, meeting their expectant gazes. They meant well in their limited way, but they fundamentally misunderstood who I was and what I needed to thrive. In their minds, my mathematical gifts were obstacles to overcome, rather than talents to develop. I like what I'm doing, I said quietly. Sitting alone in a library isn't healthy, honey. You need to learn how to interact with people. If only she knew that I spent my Saturdays in passionate discussion with some of the brightest young minds in the region, that I'd found my tribe among fellow mathematical thinkers, that for the first time in my life, I felt truly understood and appreciated. Maybe I could start tutoring other students, help them with their math homework.
Daniel snorted. Right, because that's not social at all. Karen, you need to join clubs, go to parties, date someone, normal teenage stuff. Not everyone is interested in normal teenage stuff, I said, my voice sharper than intended. The table went quiet. My father's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Excuse me? He said. I felt my pulse quicken, but I pressed on. I said, not everyone wants to do the same things. Maybe some people have different interests, and that's okay. Different isn't always better, Karen, my mother said carefully. Sometimes different is just difficult for everyone.
The implication hung in the air like smoke. I was difficult. My interests made me difficult. My entire existence was a burden my family had to bear. But as I sat there, nodding and retreating back into silence, I thought about Dr. Chen's words, about MIT's interest in my work, about the other students in our Saturday group who saw my mathematical thinking as a gift rather than a liability. Maybe my family was wrong. Maybe their definition of normal was too narrow, too limiting. Maybe it was time to stop apologizing for being exactly who I was meant to be. That night, I wrote in my hidden notebook with renewed purpose, not just solving problems now, but documenting my thoughts, my discoveries, my growing certainty that the world was much bigger than my parents' limited vision of it. For the first time in my 17 years, I began to suspect that their opinions about my worth might not be the final word. The silence at the dinner table stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. I'd been building up the courage for weeks, practicing the words in my head during those secret Saturday sessions with Dr. Chen's group. Tonight felt different. Tonight I couldn't swallow like truth any longer. I've been thinking about college, I said, my fork trembling slightly as I set it down beside my plate. My father looked up from cutting his steak. Good, it's about time. Daniel's already got 3 schools looking at him for football scholarships. I want to study mathematics. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My mother's forced smile faltered. Mathematics? Honey, that's not really a career, is it? I mean, what would you do with that? Teach? Research? There are lots of possibilities. I kept my voice steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. Dr. Chen says I have real potential. She thinks I could get into a top program. Dr. Chen? My father's eyes narrowed. Who the hell's Dr. Chen? The secret I'd been guarding for months spilled out in a rush. She's a professor at the university. I've been attending her enrichment program on Saturdays. She says my work is graduate level, that MIT might be interested. MIT? Daniel's laugh was sharp and cruel. Karen, you barely talk to people at school. You think some fancy college is going to want you? My father slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. You've been lying to us. Every Saturday you said you were going to the library. I was learning. You were deceiving your family. And for what? Some fantasy about becoming a mathematician? Karen, look around you. Look at your life. You can't even handle normal teenage responsibilities without having a breakdown. That's not fair, I whispered. Fair? What's not fair is having a daughter who lives in a dream world while the rest of us deal with reality. You want to know what's fair? Fair is getting a practical degree that leads to a stable job. Teaching elementary school, maybe, or accounting. I don't want to teach elementary school, I said louder this time. I want to push the boundaries of human knowledge. I want to solve problems that matter. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my father started laughing, a harsh, bitter sound that cut through me like glass. Solve problems that matter? He shook his head. Karen, you can't even solve the problem of being normal. You think the world needs another weirdo obsessing over numbers? You think anyone cares about your little math puzzles? Something inside me cracked. Years of swallowed words, suppressed dreams, and dismissed potential came rushing to the surface like a dam bursting. Yes,
I shouted, my voice breaking. I think the world needs people who see things differently. I think the world needs people who aren't satisfied with normal if normal means being small and scared and giving up on everything that makes life beautiful. My parents stared at me in shock. I had never raised my voice at them before, never challenged their authority so directly. You want to know what I think? I continued, standing up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. I think you're terrified that I might actually succeed at something you don't understand. I think you'd rather have a daughter who fails at being normal than one who excels at being different. How dare you? My father's voice was deadly quiet now, which was somehow worse than his shouting. After everything we've done for you, after all the excuses we've made, all the accommodations.
Accommodations? I laughed, and it sounded almost hysterical. What accommodations? You mean the way you tell me to just focus when I'm overwhelmed? The way you dismiss everything that's hard for me as an excuse? The way you act like my interests are a character flaw? Your interests are impractical, my mother said, her voice shaking. We're trying to protect you from disappointment, Karen. The real world doesn't care about your mathematical theories. The real world is mathematics, I screamed. Every computer you use, every building that doesn't collapse, every medical breakthrough, it's all built on the foundation of mathematical research. But you wouldn't know that because you've never bothered to understand what I love. I was crying now, hot tears streaming down my face as 17 years of frustration and invalidation poured out. I don't want to be like you, I continued, my voice raw. I don't want to be someone who settles for mediocrity and then tries to drag everyone else down with them. I don't want to spend my life afraid of anything that challenges me to grow. The words left my mouth like bullets, and I watched them hit their targets. My mother's face crumpled, my father's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles bulging. Daniel sat frozen, his food forgotten. Get out, my father said quietly. What? Get out of my house. If you think so little of your family, if you think you're so much better than us, then get out. Robert, my mother started. No, he held up a hand without taking his eyes off me. She wants to be independent. She wants to live in the real world. Let her see how far her precious mathematics gets her without family support. I stood there shaking, my chest heaving. Part of me wanted to take it back, to apologize, to shrink back into the grateful daughter who accepted whatever scraps of approval they offered. But a stronger part, the part that had been awakened by Dr. Chen's encouragement and nurtured by Saturday mornings with brilliant minds, refused to bend. Fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Maybe I will. I turned and walked toward the stairs, their stunned silence following me. Behind me, I heard my mother start to cry. Karen, wait! You don't mean that. You're just upset. I paused on the bottom step and looked back at them, my father rigid with anger, my mother reaching out to me with tears on her cheeks, Daniel looking confused and uncomfortable. I mean every word, I said quietly. I'm tired of apologizing for who I am. I'm tired of making myself smaller so you can feel bigger. And I'm tired of pretending that your fear of the world should limit my dreams. In my room, I called Kristen, my hands still shaking as I dialed her number. Karen, what's wrong? Through tears and broken sentences, I told her everything. About the secret math program, about my fight with my parents, about my father's ultimatum. Oh, honey, she said when I finished. Do you want me to come over? No, it's okay. I needed to tell someone who wouldn't think I was crazy. You're not crazy, Kristen said firmly. Your parents are scared because you're brilliant and they don't understand brilliant, but that doesn't make you wrong for being who you are. After we hung up, I sat on my bed staring at my hidden notebook full of mathematical proofs and half-formed theories. Tomorrow, I would have to face my parents again. I would have to decide whether to continue the lie of being their version of normal or fight for the right to become who I was meant to be. For the first time in my life,
I knew which choice I was going to make, even if it meant losing everything I'd ever known. Monday morning arrived with the weight of unspoken words hanging over our house like fog. My parents moved around me with careful politeness, as if I were a volatile chemical that might explode at any moment. Daniel avoided eye contact entirely. The silent treatment felt almost worse than their anger. At school, I struggled to focus on my regular classes. Pre-calculus felt like kindergarten arithmetic after the advanced work I'd been doing with Dr. Chen. During lunch, I found myself staring at my phone, wanting desperately to call her, but unsure how to explain what had happened at home. The decision was made for me when she appeared in the hallway after my last class. "Karen," Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but concerned. "Could we talk? I've been trying to reach you since Saturday."
I'd missed the enrichment session after my explosive fight with my parents, too emotionally drained to face anyone, even the people who understood my passion. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, following her to an empty classroom. "I had family issues." Dr. Chen closed the door and turned to face me with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see everything I was trying to hide. "What happened?" The story came pouring out. The dinner table confrontation, my parents' dismissal of my dreams, my father's ultimatum. As I spoke, Dr. Chen's expression grew increasingly troubled. "Karen," she said when I finished, "I need you to understand something. What you experienced at home, that reaction from your parents, I've seen it before." She sat down across from me, her hands folded on the desk between us. "When I was your age, growing up in San Francisco, my parents owned a small restaurant. They worked 16-hour days just to keep it afloat. When I told them I wanted to study mathematics, they were less than supportive." Her smile was rueful. "They saw education as practical. Medicine, law, business, those were acceptable. Pure mathematics? That was an indulgence for rich white men." I stared at her, trying to imagine the composed, brilliant professor I knew as a teenager facing the same dismissal I'd experienced. "What did you do?" I fought. Not with anger, like you did, though God knows I wanted to. I fought with achievement. Every small victory, every award, every recognition became proof that their fear was misplaced. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with papers. "Which brings me to why I'm here. Karen, your work on prime number distributions isn't just impressive for a high school student, it's impressive, period. I've shared it with colleagues at MIT, Stanford, and Princeton." My breath caught. And they want to see more. But more importantly, there's a competition coming up. The International Mathematical Olympiad. It's for high school students, but the problems are at a level that challenge even graduate students. She opened the folder and spread several papers across the desk. Complex equations and proofs filled the pages, dense with symbols and notation that would look like hieroglyphics to most people, but sang like music to me. "I think you could place, possibly even medal. But it would require intensive preparation. Saturday sessions wouldn't be enough. You'd need to dedicate serious time to this, possibly at the expense of other activities." I looked at the problems, my brain already starting to work on the patterns I could see emerging from the chaos of symbols. "My parents think mathematics is a waste of time," I said quietly. "Your parents are wrong." Dr. Chen's voice was firm. "Karen, I've been teaching for over 20 years. I've worked with some of the brightest mathematical minds in the world. What you have is rare. Not just intelligence. Lots of people are intelligent. You have mathematical intuition. You see patterns others miss. You approach problems from angles that trained mathematicians wouldn't consider." She paused, studying my face. "But talent without support is like a seed without water. It can survive for a while on its own resources, but eventually it needs nourishment to grow." "I don't know if I can keep lying to them about where I am," I admitted. "Then don't lie.
Dr. Chen's suggestion was simple, but it sent a jolt of fear through me. Karen, you're 17. In less than a year, you'll be an adult. You can make your own choices about how to spend your time and what to pursue. They'll cut me off. My dad already threatened to kick me out. That's a possibility, she said honestly. But let me ask you something. If you abandon mathematics to please them, if you choose accounting or elementary education instead of following your passion, will that guarantee their approval? Or will you just be trading one disappointment for another? I thought about my parents' reaction to everything I'd ever been interested in. My childhood fascination with organizing objects by mathematical properties, my difficulty with social situations, my need for routine and predictability. Nothing about me had ever been quite right in their eyes. I brought something else, Dr. Chen said, reaching back into her briefcase. She pulled out a small, worn photograph and placed it on the desk.
It showed a young Asian woman in graduation robes, holding a diploma and beaming at the camera. She looked familiar, but it took me a moment to recognize Dr. Chen without her gray hair and professional demeanor. PhD from MIT, 1995, she said. My parents didn't come to the ceremony. They said they were too busy at the restaurant. I'm sorry. Don't be, because this is the important part. 6 months later, when I published my first major paper, when the local newspaper wrote an article about the local girl who conquered MIT, suddenly they were proud. Suddenly, my achievements mattered. She picked up the photo and looked at it for a moment before meeting my eyes again. Your parents' current inability to see your worth doesn't determine your actual worth, Karen. But here's what I learned. You can't prove your value by diminishing yourself. You can only prove it by becoming everything you're capable of being. The weight of her words settled over me like a challenge and a promise combined. If I do this, I said slowly, if I compete in this Olympiad, what happens if I fail? What if my parents are right and I'm just deluding myself? Dr. Chen smiled. Then you'll have failed while reaching for something extraordinary instead of succeeding at something ordinary. But Karen, I don't think you're going to fail. She gathered up the problem sets and placed them in front of me. Take these home, look them over. If you decide you want to prepare for the Olympiad, meet me here tomorrow after school. If not, I'll understand. But whatever you decide, decide based on what you want for your future, not what others want from you. That evening at dinner, the silence continued, but for the first time, it didn't feel oppressive. Instead, it felt like space, room for me to think, to plan, to make choices that were mine alone. After my parents went to bed, I spread Dr. Chen's problem sets across my desk and began to work. The mathematics was more challenging than anything I'd encountered before, requiring not just knowledge, but creativity, intuition, and a willingness to explore uncharted territory. As I worked through the first problem, feeling my brain stretch and flex in ways that were both difficult and exhilarating, I realized something had changed. The approval I'd spent 17 years seeking from my parents had been replaced by something more powerful: approval from myself. Tomorrow, I would tell Dr. Chen I wanted to compete. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, I was ready to find out how far my strange, obsessive, wonderful mind could take me. The college acceptance letter sat on my desk like a golden ticket, its MIT letterhead catching the late afternoon light streaming through my bedroom window. Full scholarship, research assistantship with Dr. Elizabeth Warren in the mathematics department, housing guaranteed for all 4 years. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, reading the same paragraph over and over. Your exceptional performance in the International Mathematical Olympiad, combined with your innovative research in prime number theory, makes you exactly the kind of student we hope to welcome to our program. Bronze medal. I'd won a bronze medal at the IMO, placing 3rd in the world among high school students. For 6 months, I'd thrown myself into preparation with Dr. Chen, meeting after school every day, working through problems that stretched the boundaries of what I thought was possible. When the results were announced, she'd cried. Actually cried right there in front of the computer screen. My parents' reaction had been different.
"That's nice, honey," my mother had said when I showed them the medal, not looking up from her magazine. "Did you remember to pick up the dry cleaning?" My father had been more direct. "Now maybe you can focus on practical things, like figuring out what you're actually going to do with your life." They still didn't understand. Even with a bronze medal from an international competition, even with a full scholarship to one of the most prestigious universities, they saw my mathematics as an expensive hobby rather than a calling, which is why I'd applied to MIT in secret. A soft knock on my door made me shove the letter under my calculus textbook. "Come in." My mother peered around the door, her expression cautious. We'd been walking on eggshells around each other since my explosion at the dinner table months ago. "Dinner's ready," she said. "Your father wants to talk to you about college applications. He's found some good programs nearby. Business administration, elementary education." My stomach clenched. "I'll be down in a minute." She lingered in the doorway. "Karen, I know things have been tense between us, but we love you. We just want what's best." "I know, Mom."
But as she closed the door, I pulled the MIT letter back out and read it again. They loved me, but their version of love felt like a cage designed to keep me small and safe and thoroughly ordinary. Dinner was a minefield of unspoken expectations. "I've arranged meetings with admissions counselors at State and Community College," my father announced, passing the mashed potatoes. "State has a decent business program, and community college is affordable. You could live at home, save money." "What about my scholarship applications?" I asked carefully. "Karen, be realistic. Full scholarships are rare, and you need backup plans. Besides, those fancy schools aren't for people like us." People like us? I thought about Dr. Chen, who'd grown up working in her parents' restaurant and was now a tenured professor at a major university. I thought about my IMO teammates, kids from small towns and immigrant families who are now at Harvard, Stanford, Princeton. "Maybe I could at least apply to a few reach schools," I suggested, "just to see. And waste money on application fees for schools that won't accept you?" My father shook his head. "I won't enable that kind of fantasy." I excused myself early and called Kristen from my room. "I got in," I whispered into the phone. "Got in where?" "Oh my God, MIT? Full scholarship, research position, everything." "Karen, that's incredible. When do you tell your parents?" I was quiet for so long she said my name again. "I don't think I'm going to tell them," I said finally. "What do you mean?" "They'll find a way to talk me out of it. They'll say I'm not ready, that I can't handle being so far from home, that I should be practical. They'll make me doubt myself until I convince myself they're right. So what are you going to do?" I looked around my childhood bedroom, the twin bed with its faded butterfly comforter, the bookshelf crammed with math textbooks I'd bought with babysitting money, the desk where I'd spent countless hours working on problems that made my soul sing. "I'm going to go," I said. "I'm going to accept the scholarship, pack my things, and start the life I want instead of the one they think I should have." The next few months passed in a blur of secret preparations. I accepted MIT's offer through an online portal, filling out housing forms and class preferences while my parents thought I was doing homework. I applied for a summer job at a local tutoring center to earn money for expenses they wouldn't cover. I researched everything about freshman year, from meal plans to study groups, creating a detailed plan for survival without family support. Kristen helped where she could, letting me use her address for some official correspondence and listening when the guilt threatened to overwhelm me, because despite everything, I did feel guilty. These were my parents. They raised me, fed me, given me a roof over my head. The fact that they'd also consistently dismissed my dreams and invalidated my struggles didn't make the guilt go away. "You don't owe them a smaller life," Kristen reminded me one evening as we sat in her car outside my house. "You don't owe anyone that." The final confrontation came in August, 2 weeks before I was supposed to leave for MIT. I was in my room, quietly packing clothes into a suitcase I'd hidden in my closet, when my mother walked in without knocking.
Karen, what are you? She stopped, staring at the suitcase, the acceptance letter now prominently displayed on my desk, the MIT sweatshirt I ordered online. Mom, I started. Robert, she called, her voice sharp with panic. Robert, come here right now. My father appeared in the doorway, took one look at the scene, and his face went through several shades of red. What the hell is this? He demanded, grabbing the acceptance letter. I got into MIT, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Full scholarship. I'm starting in 2 weeks. Like hell you are. He crumpled the letter in his fist. You're 18 years old. You can barely handle living in this house, and you think you're ready for college across the country? I am ready.
No, you're not. My mother's voice was rising toward hysteria. Karen, you don't understand what you're doing. You'll be completely alone. No family, no support system. What happens when you have one of your episodes? Who's going to help you then? Episodes. Their word for my sensory overload, my need for routine, all the ways my brain worked differently from theirs. I'll figure it out, I said, the same way I figured everything else out. With whose money? My father asked. You think this full scholarship covers everything? Books, food, clothes, emergencies? You're going to need family support, and family support comes with family input about your decisions. The threat was clear. Support me or lose their financial backing entirely. I took a deep breath and met his eyes. Then I guess I won't need family support. The silence that followed was deafening. You're making a mistake, my mother said, tears starting to flow. You're throwing away your family for some fantasy. I'm not throwing anything away, I replied. I'm just not allowing your fear to define my future anymore. Fear? My father's voice was dangerous. We're being realistic. We're trying to protect you from disappointment. No, I said, and my voice was stronger than I'd ever heard it. You're protecting yourselves from the possibility that I might succeed at something you don't understand. You're protecting yourselves from having to admit that maybe, just maybe, your daughter is capable of more than you ever imagined. 2 weeks later, Kristen drove me to the airport. My parents had maintained their silence, neither helping with preparations nor saying goodbye. Daniel had managed an awkward hug and a mumbled good luck, but that was all. As we sat in the departure lounge, waiting for my flight to Boston, I felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration that made my hands shake. You're doing the right thing, Kristen said, squeezing my hand. What if I'm not? What if they're right and I crash and burn? Then you'll pick yourself up and try again. But Karen, she turned to face me fully. I've known you since we were kids. I've watched you solve problems that would break other people's brains. I've seen you persist through things that would make most people give up. If anyone can do this, it's you. When they called my boarding group, I stood up on shaky legs and shouldered my backpack. Everything I owned fit in 2 suitcases and a carry-on bag. I was heading to one of the world's most challenging universities with no family support, no safety net, and only my own stubborn determination to keep me going. It was terrifying. It was also the first day of my real life. As the plane lifted off, carrying me away from everything I'd ever known, I pressed my face to the window and watched my hometown shrink below me. Somewhere down there were my parents, probably still convinced I was making a huge mistake. Maybe I was, but for the first time in 18 years, it would be my mistake to make, and that felt like freedom. MIT hit me like a freight train wrapped in ivy and academic prestige. The campus was beautiful, intimidating, and utterly overwhelming. Students moved with the confident stride of people who belonged there, speaking casually about concepts I'd only read about in advanced textbooks. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going and what they were doing. I felt like an imposter wearing someone else's clothes. My roommate, Kristen, not my friend from home, but a computer science major from California, was everything I wasn't. Socially confident, effortlessly organized and seemingly unbothered by the chaos of freshman orientation. She made friends instantly, joined study groups within days, and had already mapped out her 4-year plan by the end of the first week. Meanwhile, I was struggling to find the dining hall without having a panic attack. The sensory overload was constant and brutal. Fluorescent lights buzzed in lecture halls packed with 300 students. The dormitory corridors echoed with slamming doors, blaring music, and conversations that stretched late into the night. The cafeteria was a cacophony of clattering dishes, grinding coffee machines, and hundreds of overlapping voices that made my skin crawl. I started eating granola bars in my room instead of facing the cafeteria chaos. I mapped out routes between buildings that avoided the busiest walkways. I wore sunglasses indoors and
Noise-canceling headphones whenever possible, earning strange looks that made my cheeks burn with shame. My parents had been right about one thing. I couldn't handle this alone, but I was too proud to admit it and too terrified to go home. The academics were brutal in a completely different way than high school. These weren't gifted kids who happened to be good at math. These were the best mathematical minds from around the world, people who'd been groomed for academic success since childhood. In my first real analysis class, I listened to classmates discuss concepts I'd never encountered, their casual familiarity making me realize how much I didn't know. I started working 18-hour days, trying to catch up. While other students socialized or joined clubs, I haunted the library, pushing myself through problem sets that left me dizzy with exhaustion. I skipped meals, ignored invitations to study groups, and began to isolate myself completely. By October, I was surviving on 3 hours of sleep, living entirely on vending machine food, and having daily panic attacks and bathroom stalls between classes. "You look terrible," my roommate Kristen observed one morning as I stumbled out of bed for my 8 a.m. differential equations class. "Are you eating actual food?" I mumbled something about being fine and grabbed my backpack, but she caught my arm. "Seriously, when's the last time you had a real meal or talked to another human being who wasn't a professor?" I couldn't remember. The days had blurred into a cycle of classes, problem sets, and the groaning certainty that everyone around me was smarter, better prepared, more deserving of being here. The breaking point came during my advanced calculus midterm. I'd studied for 2 weeks straight, surviving on caffeine and determination. I knew the material backward and forward. But when I walked into the examination room, a huge lecture hall with those terrible buzzing lights, my brain simply shut down. The sensory assault hit me like a wall. The fluorescent glare, the scratching of pencils on paper, the subtle sounds of students shifting in their seats, the smell of coffee and anxiety sweat. My hands started shaking. My vision tunneled. The equations on the page turned into meaningless symbols dancing before my eyes. I sat there for 2 hours, paralyzed, watching my classmates fill page after page while I couldn't even write my name without my hand trembling. When time was called, I turned in a mostly blank exam and ran to the nearest bathroom, where I collapsed in a stall and sobbed until my throat was raw. That night, I called Kristen from home. Not my roommate, my real Kristen, the one who'd driven me to the airport with such hope in her eyes. "I can't do this," I whispered into the phone, my voice hoarse from crying. "I'm failing. Everyone here is smarter than me. I don't belong here." What happened? Through broken sentences, I told her about the isolation, the sensory overload, the exam disaster, about how I'd been so focused on proving my parents wrong that I'd ignored every signal my body and mind had been sending me about needing help. "Karen," she said gently, "when's the last time you talked to someone about what you're going through? A counselor, maybe? Or that professor who helped you get there?" I'd been avoiding Dr. Chen's emails, too ashamed to admit that I was struggling. She believed in me, fought for me, celebrated my acceptance to MIT. How could I tell her I was failing at the first real challenge? "My parents were right," I said. "I'm not cut out for this. I can barely handle normal life, and I thought I could handle MIT?" "Stop," Kristen's voice was firm. Your parents were wrong about you then, and you're wrong about yourself now. You're not failing because you're not smart enough. You're struggling because you're trying to do everything alone, the same way you had to survive at home. Her words hit me like cold water. What do you mean? I mean, you spent 18 years learning to hide who you are, to manage your challenges in secret, to never ask for help because asking meant admitting weakness. But college isn't your parents' house, Karen. You don't have to survive it alone. After we hung up, I sat in my narrow dorm bed staring at my laptop screen. Dr. Chen's latest email was still open. How are you adjusting to college life? I'd love to hear about your classes. Instead of responding with the cheerful lies I'd been crafting, I began to type the truth. Dr. Chen, I wrote, I think I'm falling apart, and I don't know how to ask for help. I hit send before I could change my mind. Her reply came within an hour. I'll be on the next flight to Boston. You're not alone in this.
For the first time since arriving at MIT, I felt something other than panic or despair. I felt hope. Dr. Chen arrived at MIT like a mathematical fairy godmother, armed with tissues, practical advice, and an unshakable belief in my potential. She took one look at my hollow-eyed, granola bar-sustained existence and immediately went into crisis management mode. First, she said, sitting across from me in the campus counseling center, where she marched me within hours of her arrival, we're getting you properly diagnosed and supported. The evaluation took weeks, but the results weren't surprising to anyone except me. Autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, sensory processing differences that explained why MIT's environment felt like torture, while mathematics felt like coming home. This doesn't make you broken, the counselor explained as we reviewed the assessment. It makes you different. And different can be extraordinary if you learn to work with your brain instead of against it. With Dr. Chen's advocacy and my new diagnosis, everything changed. I got accommodations, extended time on exams, permission to take tests in quiet rooms, access to noise-dampening headphones during lectures. More importantly, I got permission to stop pretending I was neurotypical. The transformation wasn't immediate, but it was profound. Instead of forcing myself to eat in the chaotic dining hall, I got a meal plan that let me prepare simple foods in the dormitory kitchen. Instead of sitting in lecture halls that felt like sensory torture chambers, I found professors who were willing to let me audit their classes online and meet for office hours to discuss the material. Most critically, I stopped trying to be social in ways that drained me and started connecting with people around our shared passion for mathematics. That's how I found the graduate students. MIT's mathematics department had an unofficial tradition: Thursday evening problem sessions where graduate students and advanced undergraduates gathered to tackle unsolved problems, share research ideas, and argue about proofs until the custodial staff kicked them out. It was exactly the kind of intellectual community I'd been craving. "You're the freshman who won the bronze medal at IMO," said Marcus, a second-year PhD student, when I nervously introduced myself at my first session. I nodded, expecting the usual dismissive comment about high school competitions being cute but irrelevant. Instead, he grinned. "Want to see something cool? I've been working on a problem in analytic number theory that might interest you." For the next 4 hours, I forgot about my social anxiety, my sensory issues, and my imposter syndrome. I was completely absorbed in the mathematical puzzle Marcus had presented, my mind firing on all cylinders as I explored different approaches to the proof. "Holy shit!" said Elena, a PhD candidate who'd been watching me work. "You just solved in one evening what took our research group 3 weeks to figure out." I looked down at the pages of calculations I'd filled, suddenly self-conscious. I probably made an error somewhere. "No," Marcus said, checking my work line by line. "This is correct and elegant. Where did you learn to approach problems like this?" The question caught me off guard. Where had I learned it? Not from any textbook or formal instruction. It was just how my brain worked, seeing patterns others missed,
making connections that seemed obvious to me but revolutionary to others. I don't know, I admitted. I just see it differently, I guess. That night marked the beginning of my real education at MIT. Not just in classrooms, but in those Thursday evening sessions where I began to understand that my different way of thinking wasn't a disability to overcome, it was a gift to cultivate. By spring semester, professors were seeking me out. My real analysis professor asked me to present my approach to a particularly challenging theorem to the class. My abstract algebra instructor invited me to attend graduate-level seminars. Word spread through the mathematics department about the quiet freshman who saw problems from angles that made experienced researchers rethink their assumptions. The validation felt intoxicating after years of being dismissed as weird or difficult. But it was Dr. Elizabeth Warren, my research supervisor, who changed everything. "Karen," she said during one of our monthly meetings, "I want to talk to you about your future plans." I was finishing my freshman year with straight A's, despite my rocky start. I'd assumed I would continue taking classes, maybe declare a mathematics major, follow the standard undergraduate path. "Have you considered accelerating your timeline? Your work on prime distributions is already at a graduate level. With focused research and the right mentorship, you could be making original contributions to the field much sooner than the traditional path would allow."
Original contributions. The phrase sent a thrill through me. What would that look like? Independent research starting this summer, publication track work by their sophomore year, possibly completing your undergraduate degree early and moving directly into PhD coursework. She leaned forward, her expression intense. "Karen, in 30 years of teaching mathematics, I've seen maybe 5 students with your intuitive grasp of number theory. You're not just smart, you're creatively brilliant in a way that can't be taught." That evening, I called home for the first time since arriving at MIT. My mother answered, and I could hear the television blaring in the background. "Karen? Is everything okay? You never call." "I'm fine, Mom. Better than fine, actually. I wanted to tell you about some opportunities I'm being offered here." I explained about the research position, the possibility of early graduation, the professors who were taking notice of my work. The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if we had been disconnected. "Mom? That's wonderful, honey. I'm proud of you." But I could hear the bewilderment in her voice, the inability to grasp what any of it meant. To her, I was still the difficult daughter who had meltdowns over dirty dishes and couldn't make friends at school. The idea that my differences might actually be assets in the world of advanced mathematics was incomprehensible. "Have you been taking care of yourself?" she asked. "Eating properly? Getting enough sleep?" "Yes, Mom." For the first time, it was true. With proper accommodations and a community that valued my mind over my social skills, I was thriving. After we hung up, I sat in my dorm room looking out at the MIT campus. Students walked across the quad, heading to study groups, social events, the normal college experiences I'd never been interested in pursuing. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was missing out. I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The phone call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, jolting me from sleep in my cramped graduate student apartment. I'd been up until 3 a.m. working on a proof that had been eluding me for months, so my first instinct was to ignore the call and go back to sleep. But something made me answer. "Karen Salonga." The voice was crisp, British, official. "Yes?" "This is Professor James Morrison calling from the International Mathematical Union. I hope I haven't called at an inconvenient time." My heart stopped. The International Mathematical Union only called for one reason. "Ms. Salonga, it is my honor to inform you that you have been selected as a recipient of the Fields Medal. You are, at 23, the youngest recipient in the medal's history." The phone slipped from my numb fingers and clattered to the floor. The Fields Medal. The highest honor in mathematics.
the Nobel Prize of my field, awarded only every 4 years to mathematicians under 40 who had made exceptional contributions to the discipline. I was 23 years old. I had been working on my PhD for 2 years, had published 6 papers that revolutionized approaches to prime number theory, and somehow, impossibly, the mathematical community had deemed my work worthy of their highest recognition. Through the static in my brain, I heard Professor Morrison's voice continuing from the phone on the floor. I scrambled to pick it up. Ceremony will be held in Seoul next month. We'll need confirmation of your attendance, and there will be media interviews. I'm sorry, I interrupted, my voice shaking. Could you repeat that? I think I'm in shock. His laughter was warm. Quite understandable. You've achieved something remarkable, Ms. Salonga. Your work on the distribution of prime gaps has opened entirely new avenues of research. The committee was unanimous in their decision. After we hung up, I sat on my apartment floor in stunned silence. Then, without thinking, I called the one person who'd believed in me from the beginning. Dr. Chen?
Karen? It's barely 7 in the morning. Are you... I won. The words felt surreal leaving my mouth. I won the Fields Medal. The silence on her end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard something that made my chest tight with emotion. The sound of my mentor crying. "Oh, my dear girl," she said through her tears. "I knew it. I knew from the moment I saw your work that you were destined for something extraordinary." The next few weeks passed in a blur of interviews, photo shoots, and preparation for the ceremony in Seoul. The media attention was overwhelming. Headlines about the youngest Fields Medal winner in history and the autism breakthrough in mathematics that made me cringe with their simplification of both my condition and my achievement. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the silence from my family. I'd sent them a carefully worded email about the medal, explaining what it meant, including links to news articles that might help them understand the significance. I'd even called twice, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. Finally, 3 days before I was supposed to leave for Seoul, my phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. "Karen?" Her voice was strained, artificial. "Congratulations on your award." "Thank you." "Your father and I were wondering if you might have time to see us when you get back from your trip. Maybe we could take you to dinner." Celebrate properly. The invitation felt hollow, too little too late. After 5 years of silence, of dismissing my achievements as irrelevant obsessions, they wanted to celebrate now that the whole world was paying attention. "No," I said quietly. "You weren't proud of me. You were ashamed of me. There's a difference." "That's not..." "Mom, do you remember what you said when I told you I wanted to study mathematics? You said it wasn't a real career. You said I was living in a fantasy world. You said I needed to be more practical, more normal. We were trying to protect you. You were trying to control me. And when I refused to be controlled, you cut me off. You didn't call when I graduated magna cum laude. You didn't congratulate me when I got into the PhD program. You didn't reach out when my first paper was published. But now that the whole world is celebrating what you tried to kill in me, suddenly you want to be involved?" My mother was crying now. "Please, Karen, we're your daughter. We love you." "I know you do. And I meant it. But love without acceptance isn't enough. An acceptance that only comes after external validation isn't real." I hung up
and sat in my quiet apartment, surrounded by the life I'd built for myself. Books lined every wall. My desk was covered with the beautiful chaos of ongoing research. Photos from academic conferences showed me smiling alongside the brilliant minds I now call colleagues and friends. It was a life my parents had never imagined for me, a life where my autism wasn't a barrier to overcome, but a different way of seeing that had led to genuine breakthroughs, where my obsessive focus and pattern recognition, the very traits they tried to suppress, had become my greatest strengths. The phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen. "Ready to change the world?" I smiled and typed back, "I think I already have." Seoul was magnificent. Standing on the stage at the International Congress of Mathematicians, holding the gold medal that represented my achievements, but also the validation of every weird, brilliant, misunderstood kid who'd ever been told they were too different to matter. I felt something I'd never experienced before. Complete peace with who I was. In my acceptance speech, I spoke about the beauty of thinking differently, about how the traits that made me challenging to live with had also made me capable of seeing mathematical truth from angles others missed. I talked about the importance of nurturing neurodivergent minds instead of trying to fix them. But mostly, I talked about the power of refusing to make yourself smaller to fit into other people's limited vision of who you should be.
The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. 4 minutes of the world's greatest mathematical minds celebrating not just my work, stood in her parents' kitchen, overwhelmed and misunderstood, desperately trying to explain that she wasn't making excuses, she was just different. I wished I could tell her that one day that difference would be her greatest gift. I wished I could tell her that she was enough, exactly as she was. But then I realized I didn't need to tell her anything. I'd already proven it. Today, I teach at Princeton. My office is covered with equations and photos of students who think differently. Brilliant minds I mentor through their own journeys of self-discovery. Dr. Chen visits often. Kristen is my daughter's godmother. My chosen family gathers around a table where no one apologizes for being passionate, obsessive, or wonderfully strange. The Fields Medal sits on my bookshelf, but my greatest achievement walks through my door every day. Young mathematicians who've learned that their differences aren't excuses to overcome, they're gifts to unwrap. My name is Karen Salonga. At 23, I proved my worth to the world. But more importantly, I proved it to myself.